student advisors, Selena and Lingo, here with us today. So I want to extend a thank you to them too for joining us today. They are PhD candidates in sociology, I believe, but they'll get more into that towards the end of our presentation. But yeah, they're here to answer any questions that you guys may have about graduate school. And if you do have any questions, you can go ahead and type it in the Q&A chat function below. And towards the end of the presentation, we'll get more into answering those questions.
Okay, well, let's get started. Then let's hop into it with the first slide. So the first thing we're going to talk about is gap years. So gap years can be very beneficial if you aren't quite sure that you want to go straight into graduate school after undergrad. So it's like a transitional period that can provide many valuable opportunities. You can explore an interest or fulfill a dream you may not have the time to do in the future. You can develop transferable skills through real life experiences, whether this be labs, jobs, internships. You can learn more about yourself through self-evaluation. You can make an impact within the community by volunteering or joining a meaningful organization, such as maybe a nonprofit. You can also take this experience to travel, gain exposure to different cultures, or just prepare for the future graduate exams, such as the LSAT, the MCAT, the GRE, whichever one you do have to take. Gap years also allow you to explore various career fields, especially if you're not specifically sure what you want to do in the future.
Yeah, so we recommend to start researching and working on your application early. So that means, during summer, start researching specific graduate programs that you find interesting. So throughout this presentation, we have a couple steps just to kind of show you like where you should be at, during the summer, during fall quarter. And it's just like some tips that we recommend for you guys to start doing just to ensure that you turn in your application, your graduate school application process on time, and that you're satisfied with, what maybe you wrote for your personal statements. So step one, determine which type of graduate degree best fits your career goals. So with this, I would recommend maybe taking on internships so you can get that hands-on experience in the field that you hope to enter, and just always exploring that field. I feel like it's more of like a trial and error, seeing what you like, seeing what you don't like, and it's just always good to get that hands-on experience to explore your interests. And step two, financially prepare for graduate school. So we all know graduate school is pricey. So it's always good just to be mindful of how much it's going to cost just to maybe apply. And then once you're in it, so we would recommend maybe start like a savings account for graduate school, and maybe every paycheck start putting in money to that savings account. Another thing that we do recommend is apply to scholarships. Any scholarships that are available that will be applied for graduate school will be a big help as well during the summer. And just another thing to be mindful of as well is FAFSA that does open October 1st. So, maybe during the summer, you could start getting ahead of the game and just getting all your documents ready. So when it does open up, you could be prepared and not submit it late. And step three, prepare and register for required entrance exams, whether that be the MCAT, LSAT, etc. And step four is begin working on statements of purpose and or personal statement. So with that, sometimes you might not know where to start, or you might need someone else to read over your personal statements. So here at UCI, we have the Division of Career Pathways, which is a great resource to go to where you could schedule appointments for like students who work there to look over your personal statements and ensure that, what you're writing is like on track with maybe what you're thinking of doing. And yeah, and there's also a lot of centers here on campus as well that will help you like look over your personal statements.
Yes, okay, moving on to fall of graduation year. Step 5 is that you start requesting those official transcripts from the registrar, whether that be online, through the mail, or in person. It's also important to be mindful that there are fees that come with shipping on certain transcripts, so you need to learn more about that. For step 6, we request you get letters of recommendation from professors and supervisors. We recommend you do this as early as possible, at least 4 weeks in advance, so that they do have time to write you the best letter of recommendation that they could. It's important that this is not rushed. Step 7, as Olivia said, we want you to submit your FAFSA as early as possible. It does open on October 1st. And then step 8, submit your graduate school applications as early as possible. It's very important to be mindful that different programs that you are applying to will have different final deadlines. So maybe you should make a spreadsheet or anything to keep in mind. Also, another resource that I want to touch on, Olivia did mention it, the Division of Career Pathways. They do have law school and graduate school workshops. So I did include a few in here. They have an in-person graduate school workshop on November 1st from 3 to 4, and a virtual event on how to ask for letters of recommendation and how to write a personal statement on November 4th from 4:30 to 5:30. So if anyone's interested in those, you can register on Handshake.
Yeah, so now we're going to get into the graduate school portfolio and what you provide to your recommenders. So the first thing is a graduate school matrix. So essentially what that is it's a matrix of all the programs that you are applying to. So for example, it could include your name, the name of the school or the program that you've applied to, and maybe the deadline for the application. So essentially what it is, it's like an Excel sheet of like all the things that you've applied to, and it just goes more in depth, and it just helps you like stay organized, throughout the graduate school application process, because sometimes it could get hectic, and it could be lost in like your emails or anything. So that just helps you stay organized. And if you do want to get like more information about that, or like how to create one or see an example of it, we actually have an example on our SSARC website. It's under the Apply to Graduate School tab, and right there it just goes more in depth about it and how one looks like. So if you are interested in that, definitely go check that out. Another thing is to provide a personal statement and a curriculum vitae. So what a curriculum vitae is, it's lengthier than a resume, and it includes information, particularly details about your academics, your work experience, maybe even your research. So it's just more lengthier than a resume, and it just goes more in depth. And then also provide relevant coursework or papers, and always send a thank you letter or email to whoever you did ask for a letter of rec for.
Okay, next we're going to talk about winter of graduation year. At this point, you should be meeting those final deadlines and submitting those last applications. Step 10, you want to check with the schools to make sure they received all the material, whether that be your test scores, your writing samples, your resume, your essays, your financial statements. It's important to follow up and make sure that they did receive all the necessary documents to consider your application. For step 11, it's one of the most important ones. You want to review your graduate school acceptances and compare the financial aid offers. This can be a deciding factor if you're going to go or not. So it's important to compare and contrast the different offers and make the best decision for you. And once you've picked the graduate school that you want to go to, you should respond accordingly to like accepting or denying, because they do have different deadlines where you do have to accept by a certain time in order to go. For step 12, it's important that you send all of your thank you cards and emails in appreciation of those that helped you on your very long journey to graduate school.
Yeah, so now we have a couple resources on who you could talk to throughout this process. So we do recommend faculty. It could be faculty on campus that teach in the field of your interest, and just faculty in the graduate programs that you are considering. Program representatives to get more detailed program information, such as courses, professors, costs, financial aid, and just the application process in general. And current grad students and alumni of the programs you are considering to learn about their experiences. So just how I said, at SSARC, we do have graduate student advisors here. So if you ever do want to reach out or schedule a consultation, you definitely could, and they could help you with that process as well. And DCP, how we went over, which is Division of Career Pathways, and the SSARC to explore your graduate school and career options. So just essentially what this is honestly just like network and make connections with like professional staff and other students on campus to help you throughout this process.
Yeah, so we do once again want to emphasize that the SSARC does have graduate school advisors that you can schedule one-on-one appointments with, and they can guide you through any questions you may have about the graduate school process and just assist you in any way that you can. Also, peer consultants do one-on-ones too, so you could schedule an appointment with me or with Olivia if you have any questions about that as well.
Yeah, so now we've concluded our presentation. So now we'll get into the Q&A section of this grad school panel. So now we're going to get into the Q&A with Selena and Lingo. So feel free to type your questions in the Q&A chat function below. And Selena and Lingo, can you briefly introduce yourself and just tell us what type of program that you are pursuing in graduate school? And Selena, you could go first, and then we could go ahead and pass it to Lingo and then go to the questions.
Yes.
Sure. Thank you so much for the presentation. Great. So I'm Selena. I'm in my 6th year of my of the sociology PhD program, and I'm a PhD candidate, if that matters. Sorry, was there what else am I supposed to say about myself?
What graduate school program are you pursuing?
Yes.
Yeah, sociology. It's the sociology
okay.
PhD. Sorry, I don't know. I mentioned I specified.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Long O, and I am also a sociology PhD at UC Irvine. So this is actually my last year, and I've been with SSARC for 7 years now. So even before I was a graduate student, so I was also an intern before, but now I've been with SSARC for 7 years. So yeah, we're excited to share some of our experiences with you. So feel free to ask us any questions you have.
Okay. Thank you for answering those questions. To get into it, there was a question about if this recording will be sent out afterwards. Yes, this is recorded and will be posted. And our first question is, if you're taking a gap year, should you wait to fill out the FAFSA?
Yeah, so the FAFSA is per academic year. So it would most likely make sense to, wait on filling that out because you have to fill it out every year in terms of when you're applying. So
Yes. Thank you. And then there was also a question on if I graduated already and took a gap year, but now in the process of applying, can I still use the campus resources to get personal statements looked at?
Yeah, we will be happy to look at it. Carissa, you can chime in. I don't know if they can use the appointment system. If they can, then yeah.
Yes, great question. So we're happy to review any alumni. I guess if you have any personal statements or whatever it might be, if you need advising or help and you're an alumni, we're still happy to see you. You may not have access to the appointment system anymore, but you can always just email us at sarc@uci.edu, and we're happy to schedule you based on your availability.
Ask the next question.
Yeah, and another question that we have is, it's actually in the chat, and it's someone asked, how many programs should we apply to on average?
So I suggest, okay, so it depends partially on if you're applying to master's programs or PhD programs. Master's programs are easier to get into, but it also depends then on your stats, like your GPA and stuff. But generally, I think that aiming somewhere around 10, if you can afford it, is a pretty safe number. I know people who have applied to as many as 20 programs, which is really overboard. It can be hard to even find that many programs to apply to. And I think I don't know, probably 5 is a minimum, because you really do want, there's a good chance you won't get into a large number of your programs. And so you want to get into at least one.
Yeah, so just to add on that, I think 10 is probably a right amount of number, because you also wanted to kind of, based on your GRE score, if they don't require GRE based on all other material, you will kind of select 10 schools, 3 as a safety school, 4 as probably within your range, and another 3 as some more top program just in case. So that should be the right amount school in terms of application. So if it doesn't, some of them doesn't work, maybe the safety school would work. So those tend to rank lower. That's something that you should keep an eye on as well. So
it's also important to mention it costs money to apply to grad school.
Right.
So we don't, you really should plan on it being about 50 to $100 per application. And if you can't afford, you know, $1,000 to apply to graduate school, then you have to adjust based on that.
Yeah, there are waivers for application
Yes.
fee, but I think they will approve it case by cases. So you still should have at least $1,000 prepared just in case.
Yeah, and the fee waivers can take a decent chunk of your time to fill out. So you really have to be committed and make sure that you match their criteria, because if you don't, it's not totally worth it because they'll most likely deny you.
Okay, so our next question is, if you're not sure if you're taking a gap year or not, should you still fill out the FAFSA? What do you guys think?
I think you might as well. It's not going to hurt. I mean, if you fill it out and you don't use it, it doesn't do anything, it doesn't go anywhere. So, yeah.
Okay, next question is, if I've spent more than the typical 4 years in undergrad, does that affect my aid for grad school with FAFSA?
I don't believe it does. No, I don't think the FAFSA is based on your age.
Yeah, I feel like the FAFSA, you might want to talk to the financial offices to make sure on that. It might vary by school, and yeah.
It might be impacted by how many, I guess it could be impacted by how many years you've been in school potentially. I would talk to the financial aid office for that.
The next question is, if we are unsure what program we want to specifically go into, do you recommend taking a gap year?
I don't personally recommend taking a gap year. And the only reason for that is that it can be very difficult to transition from a gap year to graduate school. Obviously having a job and like living your life outside of being a student is different than being a student. And some people find it very hard to go from having done school for their entire lives to having this year where they're suddenly in a totally different space and then transitioning right back to school again. However, there are other reasons why, you know, as the presentation listed, that you might want to. I think if you're not sure what program you want to go to, my advice would just be to do a lot more research on the programs, talk to students in the programs currently, look into their research and really what people are studying in the programs to get a sense of like whether or not you want to, what one you want to pick. And you can also apply to it like a large variation of them too. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I think if you're taking the gap year but not using that year to talk to more people and do research, find out what program you want to go into or what job you want to do, what you're passionate about, like taking a gap year, it's like won't give you kind of additional ideas. But yeah, like Selena said, maybe if you don't like gap year, you can take it to like, but if you don't want to take a gap year, you can still use this chance, talk to TAs or even talk to us, trying to maybe like figuring out what do you want to do and figuring out the program. Yeah, so like gap year, it really depends on, you know, if there are additional things it can offer to you. Otherwise, taking a gap year will be the same as not taking a gap year. So
one of
yeah.
the reasons for that too is because if you're applying for the year after your gap year, you're still applying in the fall of your gap year. So you don't get to have that experience of your gap year to actually inform your application process. So that's why it can be a little difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question is, how many years of research is sufficient for a PhD program?
Do you mean how many years is sufficient to get into a PhD program?
How many years of research probably like is good enough for going to a PhD program?
Yeah, I'm assuming, yeah.
Yeah, okay. For that, yeah, I also saw that saying that you're transfer students, right? I was also a transfer student as well. I actually truly getting into research, doing my own project while I was applying to PhD program. So as long as you have something that you can list it on when you're applying to PhD program, you should be good. But I also kind of had a writing sample from one of the class or something that I sent it out. That was also very helpful. So like, it doesn't have to be many years of research. It really depends on what type of research you did. And if you can specify what was your job, what skills you learned from that research. So it's not the quantity, rather the quality of the research. Yeah.
Also, just for reference, my research experience going to grad school was one class that I was taking the fall of applying, and that paper was the only thing I had to use for showing that I did any type of research and having a writing statement that was long enough. So it can be minimal.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, some application requirements online mention the resume, but not the CV. I prefer sending a CV because it's more relevant. Would that still be okay?
I mean, I think it's okay. You have to really ask yourself if they've specified a resume, that is kind of what they're requesting of you. So how much are you gaining from submitting your CV instead? Do you have a ton of research experience that you think like that's, you really need to show that? I mean, I think if you have a lot of research experience that you want to put in, that would maybe make sense. But unless you're really like, showing that off, I'm not so sure it's necessary to go around their application requirements.
Yeah, it also depends on the program. So if you're applying to a more occasional program that like say for some clinical psychology and stuff like that, they might want a more like kind of job related resume background. So that's why they require resume rather than CV, because like Selena said, a CV do have to show a lot more research focused. You can't like technically you can't list a lot of like volunteer stuff and or like work experiences. Is mainly more for like research centered for a CV. So we wouldn't discourage you. I think you'll be okay, but just in case if it's more occasional programs, there is a reason for them to ask a resume because they wanted to look at more concisely what you did for that specific occasional training. So it might be a little bit different than PhD because for most of PhD, they do say resume / CV. So it's probably program specific, but if you have any question or you can schedule appointment with us, we can go in more detail to look at what program that you're applying to.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then the next question is, what was the hardest part of the application process in both of your opinions?
The GRE.
For me, it was the statement. I mean, it was a little bit difficult to prepare for the GRE, but I also know GRE wasn't the most part that they're looking at. It might be like the first line where like it's a cutoff, but once after that, they look a lot more into the statement that you're writing. So I did spend a lot of time on writing it. And I do know right now a lot of schools don't accept GRE or GMAT or things like that. So you definitely need to put a lot of time on the statement for sure.
The next question is, what is a good GPA for grad school?
Depends on the program you're applying to. If you're looking at, so this is actually a stat you can often find on the program's website, where they will show you the average of their accepted students. So that's definitely something to look at if your programs do have that. That'll give you a really good sense of it. Otherwise, I think if you have below a 3.0, you will have a hard time getting into a grad program. And it also depends for master's programs, having a 3.0, that's probably okay. Like you can probably make that work. For a PhD program, it's not super common that people with below like a, probably like a 3.5 or so are going to have the easiest time getting in, but these are just, estimates. Every individual is different.
Yeah, oftentimes in the application, you might have a section to talk about something when going on. You can use that time to talk, kind of justify some of the classes that you take that you got a low GPA, like specifically for one quarter. as long as other parts of your application are pretty strong, you know, like it might work. So it's like they look at the whole package. Some of the school use GPA as a cutoff line, but I don't think that's for all of them. So yeah, but like Selena said, it depends on the program as well. So
Yeah, to follow on with that question, another question that we had in the chat is, if I'm a transfer student, what GPA matters more, my UCI one or the one from community college, freshman and sophomore year?
yeah, I can speak on that. I was a transfer student, so your UCI GPA is the only thing that matters. So, and you should take advantage of that. I actually had a medium GPA in community college because I was trying to adjust to it as international students as well. Once you transfer to UCI, your GPA just restarted. Like, just take advantage of it. I had a really high GPA after I transferred to UCI because of that, because everything started to refresh again. And whenever I send out my transcript, I just send out my UCI one. No one questioned that, because that's what you get your bachelor's degrees from. So take advantage of that. If you just transfer, make sure you get a good score. It's actually really good. But if it's a different case where you have a higher GPA in community college, lower GPA at UCI, you still want to send the UCI one because that's where you got your BA from. Otherwise, you won't match. So if you just transferred, just make sure you got a really good GPA right now, just to maintain that good GPA. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is, if you're applying for scholarships and fellowships, are those usually due at the same time the applications are due?
Your sources for scholarships, and those are going to vary a decent amount. Majority are probably not. Once you get into the school, then you start applying to them, and so that's, you know, yeah, that would mean that no, it's not at the same time as your application. But if you're looking for outside ones for like incoming graduate school, then they might be around some similar time, but it totally depends.
I guess we can go on to the next question. We are at almost time, but just wanted to check. Selena Lango, are you okay with continuing with questions?
I'm fine with it.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
cool. Kayla, Olivia, are you still there?
Yes.
Yeah, our internet was unstable for a while, so it kind of
No worries, no
cut off.
worries. Go ahead and continue with the question, since Selena Lango can still continue on.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Okay, so the next question is, what made you guys decide to pursue a PhD in your field?
So what made me pursue a PhD was that I wanted to be a professor, and you need a PhD for that. What made me pursue sociology was that I started off doing math, then I moved to, my math department wasn't great, so I moved to econ, and then I took PhD courses in that when I was in my undergrad, and realized that that was boring. And so then I, like, no offense to anybody who likes it, I found it boring. And then I wanted to do something that involved like multiple fields. Like, I was interested in education, but also economics, like applied and teaching wise. And the closest thing I could find was sociology, because there is social education and economic sociology are like sub categories of it. And so I figured that was the closest thing I could do.
Yeah, for me, it's I know I'm gonna pursue either a master, like graduate school, either a master or a PhD. So, but I was a little bit involved with research, so I was like, might as well try. So I did apply both PhD and a master at the same time, and I got into both. But I'm like, PhD is fully funded, so I decided to go with PhD. And once you're in PhD, you know, you might just as well keep going and then get your PhD, right? So yeah, and I still really like research, and I think that's what part keeps me going in a PhD program. But with that said, if no PhD program accepted me, probably I will be on a different trajectory. Like I won't try PhD again. So, but just to let you know, you can apply to both master and PhD. And you can certainly get a master in the PhD program and a drop out after that, and still just have your master for free. That's doable as well. But like I said, I like research, so that's why I stayed in the PhD program. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, what's the interview process like for a doctorate program?
I wasn't interviewed. Long overdue.
Yeah, I actually got an interview just because I was on campus, so they just called me to talk to me. But I do know that recently our department especially had an interview process where they will interview people. So I think the thing is that they already know you from your resume and all your statement stuff. So they probably know you by that. The way they wanted to interview is just to know who you wanted to work with. Do you know this department well enough? And do you have a not clear, but like some kind of understanding of who you want to work with, why you want to work with them, and just kind of more like a cultural fit, I guess, in a sense. Like, do you know the department? It's like a job interview as well, like where was the culture fit, like behavior stuff, because they already know other aspects of your things. So yeah, it's pretty short, won't be too long. Yeah, so I know a lot of departments start to do that now.
The next question we have is, I am a new transfer student here. When is the time to make sure I am okay to try to do research with a professor? How long does research usually take? A quarter or a year?
Yeah, I can answer this one. So I was a transfer as well. There is no time that is okay. So I think you should just keep trying once you're already on campus. I remember I start to try to connect with professor the first quarter I transferred here, because I know I only have 2 years here. So there is no time essentially showing that you're okay. You just need to show them that you're interested in doing any type of research. You just want to gain any type of experience. The hardest part you will find out is not when you are ready, is when you find a professor. It's very hard to find a professor on campus who are willing to do that. So that's the thing. How long does the research usually take? It depends. Sometimes, like for instance, my professor was really nice. He just gave me a project and say, hey, this is a thing you can try to compile news, which is sometimes they use news to do research project. I don't even know if he ended up using what I collected, but that he just gave some assignments to me as a research experience. You can also do your own research project with like Europe on campus, the undergraduate research center, and all the honors program in departments. I know sociology department has the undergrad honors department, honors program. Economics has it too, and then you can do that. That one, you will do it for the entire year. You will have a complete project that you did by yourself at the end. So you're not assisting any professor, you're just really doing your own research project. That one, I highly recommend, because that makes you more stand out in a PhD program like application, if PhD is what you're going for. So yeah.
Yeah, also in terms of that, like for the length of research, it like if you're getting onto a project that a professor is actually actively doing, it totally depends on their project. Like it might be a 10-year long research project and you're hopping in at year 9, like, you know, and maybe there's a year left, or maybe you're hopping in at year 1 and there's like 8 years left. You'll be a small part of that. So it really depends on professors, like the professor's timeline and your timeline where you're at in your program and how long you want to keep doing that research for and how long there is to do it.
Yeah, and then at the end, it really comes to the framing of it. Like they won't check if you actually did the research. I mean, sometimes maybe they will check, but you really need to write about this research experience in your statement. How you frame it, what you have learned, that's a lot different from what you actually did. So, I mean, we can talk when you are at the stage of writing a statement, we can talk about how to frame your research experience to make it sound a lot like stronger as well, even if it's just like a quarter of the experience. we can certainly do that as well. So.
Okay, the next question is, a lot of schools now are making the GRE optional, specifically because of COVID. How much of a disadvantage is it to not submit a GRE?
So I don't think it's necessarily a disadvantage at all. It just depends. Like if you, let's say if you have like a kind of lower GPA and the rest of your material is okay, but then you took the GRE and you got like 90, like fifth percentile on everything. Well, that would be an advantage, and you'd be at a disadvantage not submitting that. But let's say you did before and your application materials are fine. I think actually having the flexibility of whether or not to like choosing whether or not to submit it is an advantage in and of itself. And it really depends on whether or not it's going to hurt or help your application. But because they are making it optional, not submitting it is not like some automatic, doesn't automatically damage your application in any way.
Yeah, I would say if you haven't taken the GRE yet, and then normally preparing for a GRE will take 2 to 3 months to have a good score. I would rather spend this time, if GRE is not required, I would rather spend this time really to focusing on other aspects of your required application material. For instance, writing the statement, again, like it's kind of really important in this case. So I would rather have a really, really good draft comparing to only spend a month on writing the statement and spending like 3 months to prepare for GRE and submitting something that is not really required. So, like you can see the time that how you should put on different things. You need to kind of think about that. But if you already have a GRE and it's already pretty good, you might as well submit it. But I'm just saying, if you haven't prepared for it, there probably will be a 2 to 3 months preparation for that. So yeah, you want to think about that.
Okay, great, thank you. So our last question is, I heard that it's best to apply to programs that are fully funded. What are your opinions on that?
So I would generally, so I'm going to be talking about only PhD programs. Almost no master's program is fully funded. If you found one of those, congrats. So speaking to PhD programs, I think it depends on you. Like, the better the program is, the harder it is to get in. And so if you are totally not able to get into those, you have to ask yourself whether or not getting a PhD is the most important thing, because then you might have to end up going to a school that is fully funded, and that might be your context. However, schools that are actually reputable and getting a PhD from them is going to look really good and get you the job that you want, they are going to be fully funded. And so if you're applying to a school that isn't fully funded, you kind of have to ask yourself, how much weight is that degree actually going to carry? Is that worth, potentially 6 years of my life and not being paid very well, or not being paid at all and going into debt? It kind of does add an extra burden onto it. And so you really need to question whether or not getting a PhD from that kind of university is actually going to get you where you want to be in terms of like your career later on.
Yeah, so yeah, that's the case for PhD. Most of the program, I would say 85% of the program are fully funded once you are admitted. Most of the program won't give you an offer if they cannot fund you. But there was one school that I ran into when I applied. They did give me an offer, but only gave me 3 years of funding. The other 2 years I have to afford it myself. I immediately said no. The reason why is because just think about PhD program as a job. If your company cannot pay you, that means the company is not doing very well as well financially. So they can't, because PhD is meaning like a job, it's not just a program. You do take class in the first 2 years, but the other classes, you are basically doing research project for the school for yourself. You're teaching as well, it's a job. So if the company, right, if the school you're applying to cannot even fund you, it just means this program itself is not really doing very well. So I wouldn't suggest to go for those programs that's not fully funded. That means they just don't have enough resources. They probably don't even have enough money to keep good professors around as well. So
I also want to add to that, just because there is like what fully funded means can differ. So there's fully funded at the very base level means that your tuition and everything is waived. You're not paying tuition to go there because, like Longo said, it's a job. That's the base level of, if it doesn't do that, then you really have to be like, oof, you know, is this really worth it? However, there's other stuff on top of that. So like the next most basic thing is paying some type of stipend that helps you live off of. And that is usually through like a TA-ship, fellowships, or research like fellowships, or some combination of those things. And so that's something you really do want to look for, because having a part-time job while also trying to juggle grad school is incredibly difficult. And so I would suggest trying really hard to look for programs that do at least that. And then there's other extra stuff that goes on top of it that you could potentially get, like travel funding, summer funding, health insurance, guaranteed housing, different types of things like that, that can be added benefits that you might want to also consider once you actually have schools to compare.
Okay. Well, thank you both for sharing your experiences. I believe that was the last question. If no one has anything else they want to ask, I believe that's it.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I want to thank everybody for coming out. Thank you for Selena and Langu for taking the time to come and talk about your experiences. I really appreciate it. Yes, with that being said, I believe that we are done here.
Yes.
Have a good
Thank
rest of
you.
your day, everybody. Thank you so
Everyone.
much.
Bye. Bye, everyone.